Hello. Hello, leading ladies of the light. It's Myra Medhurst here, coming to you live from inside the private Facebook group, The Golden Path Experience. If this is the first time you've ever heard me speak on the internet, please say hi, because I would love to welcome you into this Facebook Live. And if you tend to be following along and watching these little live snippets and updates on the daily, please send us a heart. That way I know this, oh God, this personal story is reaching you tonight. Hi Dee, welcome in, beautiful. Tanya, hello, so good to see you. And if you're watching the replay, you can hashtag replay. So I'm excited and also a tad nervous. And I haven't been nervous in quite some time sharing my story, because I feel like there are huge parts of my story which are really quite embodied and essentially happened a long time ago. So I've had time to assimilate and integrate so many of the lessons and higher teachings and challenges into my body, into my teachings, and essentially into the body of my work. But what I'm going to share tonight is a little bit more recent, and I'm scared. But what's really lacking out there is actually vulnerability and truth-telling and sharing of the wisdom of stories between woman to woman and sister to sister. And so that's the territory I'm going to venture into tonight. But essentially this story is, if I could give this story to my 20-year-old self, if she was here tonight, I would love her. I would love her to hear this story. Because 20 years ago, I was very, very, very lost. And I was seeking so desperately. I felt like I definitely did not belong on this planet. And this is before the term of starseeds, you know? This is before the age of, terms like Arcturian and Palladian and Sirian. Yes, that was written about, but it was not freely spoken about and readily available as those terms and communities are used now. So this story that I'm sharing tonight, I'm sharing it for my 20-year-old self, and I hope it would bring some peace to any other woman that has perhaps felt a little like this. And so growing up around the 20s, even though I've had significant spiritual experiences in my childhood, I wouldn't say I'd embodied all of them. So my 20s were very, very dark, healing, fragmented chapters of my life. It looked kind of clean cut and orderly on the surface, but underneath you just had to scratch the surface just a little bit and I would just crumble and unravel in front of you. I felt very scared, I felt very misunderstood, and I had such a desperation in me to leave this planet. I wanted to return home. I wanted to return to the stars. I didn't understand this journey called the human experience. I had no interest in it, quite frankly. I really thought God got it all wrong, and I needed to speak to the operator of this whole design and this whole story and ask for a fucking refund. That's like the area I was in my 20s. And not for a short period. I'm talking a decade of my life of feeling that way. I was very angry. I was very lost. I wasn't particularly drawn or interested or had any clear sense of direction. The only thing that truly kept me here was my creativity, was acting school, was the chance of just like performing and putting another show on. And so if any of you can relate to that, of the desire and that desperation of just wanting to leave, if there was any kind of invitation to cross over, that became very, very intriguing to me, because I was done with the earthly plane and I would like to know very much what was on the other side. Who can relate? So bit by bit, growing up, maturing, but here is a story that actually occurred yesterday at the time of the birth of my son, 6 years ago. So yes, we celebrated Amos's party recently, but his actual birthday is yesterday, and it's quite interesting how all of the focus goes into the child. And I was busily preparing his party, and I'm like, hang on a minute, this is actually a really big day for the mother. Like, oh yeah, that's right, on the 13th of February, I actually birthed a child. And then these feelings started coming flooding back. And so what many people don't know is when the birth portal is so open and you are giving birth, the death portal is very, very close as well. And I actually had and experienced a near-death experience at the time of giving birth to Amos on the 13th of February, 6 years ago. And so Amos was born at home. I think many people in the community know that. But what I haven't shared about that story is a whole other flip side to the coin. And that is, at the moment of delivering Amos, who was healthy, breathing, a vibrant, healthy spark of awesomeness, I quickly went into hemorrhaging. And for those of you who don't know, I actually studied to become a doula in my mid-20s. And I remember a wise woman telling me in the years that I was studying to become a doula is that men go off to war and risk their lives. And she said women experience childbirth. And I now understand what she means is in that brilliant opening of the portal of creativity, of giving life, the gateway is very open. And me being very curious already, tantalizing with the idea of what it would feel like to go home, I believed somewhere, I'm not sure how or why, there was a bit of an interesting, like a magnetism, and I was magnetically pulled to the other side. And in this near-death experience, I began hemorrhaging quite significantly. I have no pain experienced in the body though. And so what happens when the human body hemorrhages is there is actually no pain. And eventually what happens is the blood, which is carrying the oxygen through the body, you actually begin to get starved of oxygen. And so I crossed over for what would be in a linear amount of time, I'd say between 3 to 4 to 5 minutes. And so I have a doula present in the room, I have a midwife, and I also have Ben, my husband, present in the room. And so it's a very different experience if I'm to ask them to recall the story, because they're having quite a traumatic response, whereas what I experienced was a complete communion of this most incredible, incredible peace. And it makes me so emotional because it is so beautiful, and I always was seeking that reunion, that communion back with the Creator. And I got a small taste of it. It's like I just dipped my fingertip in the pool of the field of universal love. And what I experienced was this overwhelming peace that not only filled my body, it filled the entire room, it filled the entire suburb, it filled the entire region of where I live. And then this like shroud and cloak of this most divine love that I've never experienced in a romantic human connection. It was way more beyond that. And there are simply no words to describe other than being deeply connected but the peace is like the peace and the love that I remember. And then I got this sense of, not that I saw clearly their faces, but the only thing I could familiarize the experience is if I were to imagine if I was to meet Mother Mary, or if I was to meet an embodied Jesus Christ, like if they were walking on this planet and I could meet them and I could be embraced and hugged and held in that beautiful divine love and peace, that is what I felt. And quickly after that, I came back into my body, and before I knew it, I'd looked up, the midwife was holding Amos, and there were 8 paramedics standing in the bathroom of where I delivered my son. And so what quickly happened after that is obviously an emergency. I was rushed to hospital. There were still some complications and I stayed in emergency for some time. And during that, it was so incredible, but they actually laid Amos on me, even in the ambulance. And so I was just still able to have a very blissful, I was still in a peaceful, blissed state, even though I was continuing to lose significant amounts of blood. So I lost over 3 liters of blood. It is a huge amount. I'm not a big frame. And so I was in emergency for some time, and my husband and I just started chanting mantras to really begin to shift the energy, because we could see people panicking in the room. And we just chanted mantras that he and I had shared with different spiritual teachers that we'd met in our journey. And there were some kind of small miracles that were happening in the emergency room. For example, I hadn't birthed a placenta yet. That was still inside me. They wanted to operate, and I said, no, just give me a moment. Just please allow me to breathe. And we just did some mantras on the body, and I just asked it to release. And eventually it did. And everyone in the emergency was like, oh, they were quite gobsmacked with that. But the flip side of all of this is that there's a physical component to this story, and that's the hard part. The hard part is obviously the rebuilding and recovering of the body. And you must understand that I'm a first-time mother. I was a breastfeeding mother. I'm not particularly that big. I don't carry surplus of fat reserves on me. And so essentially I had no energy. I couldn't lift my arms to even pick up or hold the baby, Amos. It was even very difficult for me to turn my neck, to turn my head. I was still very much bridging the gateway between both worlds. And so I was skating on thin ice for quite some time. I ended up spending several nights, the first night completely in emergency, and then eventually got transferred to a normal hospital ward where I stayed for another 5 days and 5 nights. I cannot tell you how many blood transfusions I needed. I'm talking liters and liters and liters, and then I needed several liters of iron as well. So the reason I guess I've never shared this story is that it simply just got clumped into, oh, you're a new mum, we're celebrating the baby. And so there's absolutely no time to process because you're navigating becoming a new mum and there's 1,000 things that go with that. And so I just like the near-death experience really just got clumped into that, and it's just like you just mowed it along. Like as soon as I could lift, as soon as I could breastfeed, as soon as I could walk, I couldn't even stand up to go to the toilet for several days. I'm like, there was no energy. I could only lay horizontal for 5 days. The rebuilding of blood is not a quick, immediate fix, and certainly the reestablishment of iron in the body is not a quick fix. I'm talking months and months into years even of establishing iron levels back in your body, especially when you're giving so much out as a breastfeeding mum. And so I've still got a lot of questions around the experience. Why me? You know, I felt robbed of the birth experience, but also I was like, no, you kind of got what you asked for as well. My mate, like, yeah, but you clumped it into the birth experience. Why did you do that? So I felt quite beaten up by the experience. I felt like I got the short end of the straw, wasn't really enjoying it. But more and more I've come to terms of accepting, and what this role is that of what I hold and the gifts that I have to offer. And essentially how I've been able to make sense of this is I truly am that gateway holder. It's like I do even have mentorship programs that are called Gateway. And I'd known about this intellectually before, of birthing the new earth. What does that feel like? And birthing the new earth, birthing this new golden age is so close to the death portal. And so what I learned from this experience is that we literally are holding those two portals so closely with one another. Every time you want to birth something new in your life, every time you want a new relationship, you want to start a new project, you've got a big mission as a mission soul, and you want to create incredible, beautiful communities. You want to see these beautiful 5D golden frequencies on the planet. Just know that as soon as you open the birth creative portal, that essentially you're holding open the gateway to the death portal. And there is actually no separation. And so I have no fear over the death portal now. It's one of the most inclusive, all-encompassing, caring, loving, most peaceful states I've ever been in, ever. And yes, I do desire to return there, but how I access the death portal is every time I create. Every time I birth something new, it requires a part of me to die. This older version of myself, an old thought pattern, an old energetic just baggage that I'm holding on to that I don't need anymore. And so I truly wanted to share this story is to, first of all, if anyone else has had a near-death experience, please, you're most welcome to share. And I didn't even know that's what I went through because it was quickly just not intentionally swept under the carpet. It's just as a new mum who'd just given birth to a baby, it's like, well, that's obviously my focus. It wasn't like I was sitting in therapy sessions unpacking the near-death experience. I was up most nights re-establishing my health and taking care of a newborn. And so as we continue to create, as we do open these gateways more and more, the more we pierce through the veil of this reality, I just want you to know that on the other side is the most incredible love and peace, and we are so loved. The whole fabric of the universe is built on love and inclusiveness and acceptedness and this most incredible peace. And so if I can bring that more into my life, the more peaceful I am, the more loving that I am, especially on Valentine's Day today, it's how much more loving can I be with myself? Because if we actually just sit with our Creator, we know that we've always been divinely loved and divinely held the whole entire time. And so that is my share this evening. I don't know if there's a moral to this story. I'm not sure. I'm still very much integrating the experience, even though it occurred 6 years ago. I'm quite happy and free to share the story. But yeah, essentially what we are is that image, if you know the illustration of the toroidal field. And the toroidal field is when the energy flows up and overflows out through our crown, and it comes back down our whole entire body, and then it re-enters up into the feet. And so it's a self-sustaining, self-fulfilling energy field, and it never switches off. At the birth of creation, this whole toroidal field was set into motion. And essentially that is what the human body is. And so the portal of creation, the portal of new earth, the portal of birth itself is the exact, it's actually not different. It is the exact same portal and channel to birth. And that's why birthing women can have very altered spiritual experiences, because the veils are so thin, so thin, and they, especially midwives or those present in the room with a birthing woman, they talk about, they can feel the energy shift in the room, and they can sense a field that may be a little bit more altered than their normal everyday living. That's it. I think that's all I've got. I think that's enough. But keep this in mind as we ask ourselves to begin to birth new things on the planet. And don't be put off and don't be scared if you're faced with the death process, because it is the very same gateway that you have opened. And that's not to create fear. It's probably to create acceptance and peace. There's actually peace in knowing that. And so if you can create more peace and love in your life and not be afraid of death. The ancient yogis teach this. If you can die well, if you can have peace over your death, and honestly, none of us get out of here alive. We all end up at the same chapter closing. We just don't know when our chapter is closing, that's all. But none of us escapes this play. And so if we can have peace around our death, then we will have peace and love and freedom in the way that we create. And the way in which we create is the way and the energy in which we live. And so to live well, accept your death and know that they're the same portal They are not separate energies. It is the same energy and the same opening of the gateway. I love you all so much. I'll add a little title and description to this one. You've got any comments, or tag or share this story of the near-death experience at the birth of my son. Any other woman that has gone through another near-death experience, you're most welcome to share in this group. I think we'd be all very understanding and accepting of your journey. And it would mean the world to me if you shared this story, and if any other sister got value or benefit out of it, that would mean the world to me. I love you. Good evening, and remember, follow your golden path.